two. Two, hello. What's up? What's up? Hello, friends. Hello, chat. What's going on? What's up? I'm not really sure what is going on today, honestly. I don't know. As you know, folks, I've been doing some pretty long streams lately. I was trying to keep that going. I've been trying to do 6-7 hours a day minimum. And it just doesn't look like it's going to be possible today. I've got to bring Momo to the vet. And the only time that I could get in was 3:30. I was hoping to maybe do that this morning, but it's the only time I could do it. So I only got about 2 hours here. I got about 2 hours, and I'm going to have to leave and bring the cat to the vet. And I don't know how long it's going to take. I don't really know what's going on. Maybe I'll come back after. Maybe I won't. I don't know. I was maybe supposed to talk to Aaron Thorpe today, but I don't know if that's happening now. I was kind of like, do I even need to do this today? But I kind of do have to. I took a week and a half off from vacation and being sick, so I'm trying to not miss any more streams, but it's just the only time that I could take the cat to the vet today was 3:30. And I'm going to have to go at 2:30 to go and make sure that I have enough time and everything. I hope Momo's okay. Me too. I've been kind of worried about Momo for a while. She's getting older. She's had digestive problems for a few years now and has a lot of issues with bathroom stuff and trying to keep herself clean. She can't keep herself clean. And I've really tried to do my best to help her as much as possible, but it's becoming really difficult, and you can tell she's really not happy right now. I feel like her quality of life is a little bit low at the moment, and I'm hoping that we can get this resolved. But it's a little bit scary. I don't know. I'm a little stressed, actually. I'm a little bit stressed out. I don't know. I don't really know what's going on. She's getting pretty old. She's 13 years old, which is not that old for a cat. Cats can live a lot longer than that, but it's she's had kind of health problems throughout her life, so. Illuminati Film School. No, it's not a cult. It says very specifically that it is not. It says very specifically that it is not a cult. Thank you, Dr. Awesome. And cheers to you, everyone. So that's what's going on today. And so I don't really have a plan for the stream. I was hoping to talk to Aaron, but I don't know if that's going to happen because I have to go. I don't really know what the hell's going on today. Again, I debated whether I should even log in today, but it's I can't really afford to miss any more streams. I don't really have a plan. There is a whole breakthrough news video that just dropped that I think would be really good to look at with VJ Prashad talking about this kind of anti-China witch hunt. Maybe I can just get started with that right away. I don't know. It's frustrating not having the amount of time that I need. Who knows? Who knows what's going on? What do you think we should do, chat? What do you think we should do? What's happening with you? Clue me in here. I watched Sunshine last night. There's more than one Cillian Murphy builds a big nuclear weapon film. I still haven't seen Oppenheimer, but I did watch Sunshine last night, which I still really enjoy. I still think that's definitely worth a watch. Your first Blu-ray purchase? That's got to be great on Blu-ray because it's a really nice looking movie. You know? It's a beautiful movie. Great cast. Great score. Looks fantastic. There's a few little like logic things in it that have always kind of bugged me, but very fun though. I was downstairs. What happened? Well, what happened to Comrade Diego is that I have to bring Momo to the vet today. And I'm a little bit worried about Momo. She hasn't seemed very happy recently, and I'm a little concerned about that. And I'm going to bring her to the vet. And I don't really know how it's going, and I'm stressed about that, and I'm also just stressed about trying to do the stream and work around that, because the only time that I could do it was at 3:30. So I really don't have a lot of time to work with here. Dakadoon's thinking he should go to lunch. You should check this out. It sucks to think at old mine's 17. Yeah, it is tough. And it's like I said, it's been a few years now that she's had a really hard time like staying clean. It's become really, I think, hard to maintain that for both me and her. And right now she just seems really like miserable. Dakadoon says wants to go to lunch. So check this out. Earlier, I wasn't really sure what to make to eat. I'm kind of low on groceries and supplies and stuff. And I just really I really quickly just whipped up this omelet. Like really in just a few minutes. I was kind of like, I guess I'll just do this. And it ended up being so aesthetically pleasing. This is like maybe the most aesthetically pleasing omelet that I've ever made. Check this out. It was very satisfying. It was very, very satisfying. It's become kind of a food hack for me too. It's just like putting chives and cilantro on pretty much everything I eat. I put chives and cilantro on like fucking everything, and it just automatically increases the visual aesthetic quality of it and just increases the flavorfulness as well. And there was some fresh mozz and some fresh salami in there from the Italian grocery store. Yeah, it's chives. I never got in fact, in my ignorance, I think I thought that chives and spring onion were the same thing, which I realize now that they're not. So I got chives, but it's been pretty good. Putting those in ramen or on whatever else I'm eating. It's quite nice. I did see the voice of Dale Dribble passed away. That's unfortunate. This is a very good omelet. It was very satisfying. I really liked it. As you can tell, I'm just totally low energy. Maybe I will just like, in the interest of trying to get to what I wanted to get to today, perhaps it would be a good idea to look at this breakthrough news feed. It's only 50 minutes. I've got to go at 2:30, so maybe that's a good thing to do, is just look at Brian Becker and Vijay Prashad talking about this like anti-China witch hunt and People's Forum and all this stuff. What do we think about that? Do you just jump into some serious shit? You can get 2 hours of serious shit in, and then maybe perhaps I can come back later or something like that. Split today's episode into two. Everything really depends on how long this vet thing's going to take and how like intense it is. I think we should do that. Are you feeling all right? Kind of look a little sick. I feel mostly fine. I'm tired and I have low energy and I'm anxious right now. I'm kind of stressed. So that's it. That's all. That's it. That's all. That's what we say in Quebec sometimes. Let's just jump right into this today. Okay? Jump into some serious shit. EGOS is saying for their forces to go in. This could really turn into a shit show. There's Ukraine stuff I want to talk about too. The New York Times piece about Ukraine. It's really just interesting and illuminating how the tone has changed in Western media about Ukraine with this whole counteroffensive. They're pretty much admitting that it's just a total shit show, disaster, and it's completely hopeless at this point. But that's something I would like to get into more at length after. Let's get right into this thing with this clip from VJ and Brian Becker. I will try to get to that stuff later, okay? I think the New York Times are running interference on stuff like the Hirsch pipeline piece and the new Intercept Imran Khan piece are also good tie-ins. Yeah, absolutely, for sure. The Imran Khan thing is interesting as well, right? I remember there was a lot of people that were pointing it out. I tried to like be a little bit more tepid on these accusations. Like obviously when someone like Imran Khan gets deposed in that way, you assume that the US is like at least partially involved. But I didn't want to get too ahead of myself with hurling around these accusations, tying it into his support of China or neutrality in Ukraine or whatever. But it certainly seems like that's exactly what has been going on, you know? And I remember Ben Norton, who like really was calling this a coup right away. He was getting dragged for claiming that the U.S. was behind Khan getting couped, and that really seems to be once again completely verified and vindicated at this point. Anyway, we'll get to this stuff, okay? Let's watch this clip from Breakthrough News. It's our friend Vijay Prashad. It's Brian Becker. And they're going to be talking about this new Red Scare, this anti-China witch hunt. We've been talking about it over the last couple of days, so I think this should be really helpful and useful to get into.
We need a new system. We need a new society. We need to demand that which may have sounded impossible even a few weeks ago, but is not only realizable, but an imperative necessity. "75 years ago, a witch hunt was launched against peace activists and leftists in the United States, people who opposed the growing danger of war with the USSR, the Soviet Union. Today, as the danger of military confrontation with China grows, as the United States government and the Pentagon have adopted major power conflict with China as a principal military and foreign policy priority, there is a new witch hunt against peace activists and against the left, and people are fighting back. Welcome to this week's episode of the Socialist Program. I'm your host, Brian Becker. Today we're talking with Manolo de los Santos. He's the co-executive director of the People's Forum in New York City, and also with Vijay Prashad, executive director of the Tricontinental Institute for Social Research. He's the chief editor of Leftward Books, a prolific author, most recently publishing a new book with Noam Chomsky called The Withdrawal: Iraq, Libya, Afghanistan, and the Fragility of U.S. Power. Manolo, Vijay, welcome back.
Thanks for having us.
Well, we're at sort of an important moment, a fork in the road, perhaps. As I mentioned in the introduction, people are organizing a mass movement. It's taking on the dimensions of a mass movement against the new Cold War and against the new McCarthyism, choreographed with the new Cold War. I want to read from something that the People's Forum and other organizations put out, Manolo, and then get you to comment. This was a sign-on letter. It says, "We stand against the rise of the new McCarthyism that is targeting peace activists, critics of U.S. foreign policy, and Chinese Americans. Despite increased intimidation, we remain steadfast in our mission to foster peace and international solidarity, countering the narrative of militarism,
This is some
hostility,
guy, Rob Russo, some
and
leftist based
fear."
in Canada. I was turned on to this sick individual, and I found this.
Hello, Benny. Benny Raiders. It's the dolls. Benny, listen. Benny, you know that we're friends, right? You know that I respect you. All right? You know that. I did see, unfortunately, some very troubling comments. Some very troubling comments on the app Blue Sky, made by Benny, where Benny made light. This was absolutely disgraceful to me. I'm sorry to say. It was very upsetting. It was very upsetting. Benny made some very unfortunate comments about 9/11. And you all know how patriotic I am and how seriously I take this kind of stuff. I'm so sorry, Rob. I know this means a lot to you, and it does. That's correct. And I just hope, Benny, it's not for me. It's not for me to say what the punishment should be, whatever. I just hope that, as your friend, I hope that you learn and grow from this and maybe reach out to some of the people that were affected by this, including me. And that you try and learn some decorum and some civility. That's right. Aren't you Canadian? Yes, but I'm in Canada, and I watched 9/11 on TV like many other people, and it was very scary. And I don't think it's something that should be made light of. All right. So Betty, I hope you take this seriously, and you learn and grow from this. That's all. I'm not going to cancel you yet. Not yet. But I'm sorry, but ever since Ron DeSantis declared trans people terrorists, I've been legally required to make these jokes. Sadly, I'm forced into this by the law. That is a bit of a conundrum. That is, yeah. My finger is just hovering over the cancellation button, okay? It's hovering over, it's not pressing it. It's hovering over the cancellation button. Still, though, thank you for the raid, Benny. Welcome in, Raiders. If you haven't already, please smash the follow button. I'm Rob. Hello, it's nice to see you. It's nice to have you. How was the Benny stream today? I hope it was good. I'm on a little... Okay, Benny, have a nice lunch. And thank you again. I'm having a little bit of I've been doing these longer streams this week. I've been doing like 6-7 hours usually for every stream. I really don't have as much time to work with today. I got to leave in about an hour and a half. So I am just hoping to get through this new video from Breakthrough News about the sort of the new Red Scare, the kind of anti-China hysteria, the way that peace activists and people that are trying to build a mass movement, or anyone that really has anything respectful to say about China, or who wants to push back about claims about their human rights abuses, or doesn't want to have World War III with China. I don't think that should be like a controversial stance, but apparently it is. And apparently the only way that you can hold that stance is if you're being like paid specifically by the Chinese government. So we see now the People's Forum, which has already been targeted by people across the spectrum, political spectrum. And now you see the U.S. government kind of trying to get involved in these kind of smears about the People's Forum. So we're just looking at this clip from Breakthrough News with Brian Becker and Vijay Prashad and Manolo de los Santos, who's one of the directors at the People's Forum. And we're taking a look at that today. Again, please follow if you can, and if you can, subscribe. I got less time to work with today. I got to bring my cat to the vet at 3:30. So I got to leave at about 2:30 to make sure that that's like I have enough time to do that. I'm a little bit stressed out about the health of my cat. So please, if you can, subscribe to TRRS. It really helps me out. And it will help me because I have less time to work with here today because of this cat health issue. Okay, here, let's continue this.
Statement goes on to identify major media outlets, including the New York Times, as being the initiators, the promoters, the purveyors of the new McCarthyism. Again, as we'll talk about in the show, that's not a new role for the New York Times. But Manolo, let's start. What is the sign-on letter? What's the level of support? What's your plan?
Well, our plan has been to not stay quiet. We see this as a pivotal moment when liberal media, but also conservative media, from the New York Times to Fox News, are essentially trying to trigger a new witch hunt against anyone who disagrees with their status quo politics, anyone who opposes a warmongering foreign policy by the United States government. And the incredible thing is that despite their desire to intimidate us, their desire to even isolate us from other sectors of movements in the United States, it has produced quite the opposite. Thousands of individuals inside the United States and around the world have expressed their solidarity, have signed our statement, and more importantly,
can't go the Corbyn strategy. We saw how that worked out.
Movements and local groups and collectives have also joined the statement, kind of sending a very resounding message that we won't accept this new wave of McCarthyism. We won't accept this witch hunt. We won't accept anyone trying to tell us that to be dissenting, to be in opposition, is to be un-American in their language.
Vijay, the New York Times had a major attack piece against Tricontinental Research, Code Pink, the People's Forum. I guess, according to the New York Times, anybody who says that they're for peace with China or a different orientation of U.S. policy, or they oppose militarism, they oppose the United States going to war after war after war, as you have done, that you're echoing and repeating Chinese propaganda points. That means you must be a sort of an agent of China.
And like we've been uncovering this week as well, and talking about, this is just word for word the exact same Red Scare playbook against the Soviet Union. They're just trotting out the same thing over and over again. And the sad thing is that there's an audience for it. Not only is there an audience of liberals for it, but there's an audience of like anarchists and social democrats and ultra leftists. And I would really like for people to think about or learn about the previous Red Scare and these strategies that were employed, and pay attention to the fact that these exact things are going on to this day, these exact strategies, and not contribute to that. You know, I understand if people aren't comfortable with certain, like making certain advocacies in these difficult, uncomfortable subjects, but I would like to think that people would be smarter than to like pile on to and contribute to these kind of McCarthyist smears. Even if you hate tankies, if you're on the left and you hate tankies with every fiber of your being, I think it's like I think people should pay attention to when they're contributing to a McCarthyist Red Scare fear campaign. You know? Maybe that's asking too much. I don't know. Hey, Marty, how's it going? Careful, you're too dangerous, Marty. Talk about too dangerous for Blue Sky with Benny.gay. Now we got Marty here as well. Just repeatedly gets canceled on there. It's too outrageous. Hello, Marty.
I mean, this is the same sort of absurd, bizarre, ridiculous, and racist coverage that the New York Times visited upon W.E.B. Du Bois, Paul Robeson, Jeff Sessions, who was Attorney General, used to say the same thing about Martin Luther King Jr. He was un-American. Anyway, it's the same playbook.
Well, Brian, that's great company. So I would prefer to be in the company
And so would
of
I.
Du Bois, Paul Robeson, Martin Luther King, than to be in the company, the executive suites of the New York Times. So certainly, thanks for making that list available to me and making me feel good at the beginning of your show. But we're also in other company. Fascinatingly, in July, US Treasury Secretary Janet Yellen went to China, where she talked with the Chinese about common points of agreement, where she made a statement saying that the US China relationship is on surer footing. That's a direct quote from Janet Yellen, who's in Biden's cabinet, talking about the need to dial back on the rhetoric and to increase areas where China, United States can collaborate. Well, after Janet Yellen left China, who comes to China? Interesting. At the age of 100, Henry Kissinger shows up in Beijing. Henry Kissinger meets Xi Jinping. Henry Kissinger has a conversation saying, hey, listen, we shouldn't be ramping up this conflict between
You
China
don't
and
need to
United
tell
States.
President
We
Xi
need to
that.
dial it down. I mean, we are not saying anything very different than that. We are saying we don't believe that confrontation imposed by the United States on countries like China, but also other countries, South Africa, Brazil, and so on, this confrontation is not good for the planet. We have some serious issues to deal with: climate catastrophe, the jobs crisis around the world, the problem of militarism, the problem of increased arms sales around the world. These are real issues, and we must deal with these issues in a collaborative way. We are saying that. We've already said that, in our institute, Tricontinental. We're saying that, in fact, interestingly, alongside Janet Yellen. So I don't see why the New York Times, at this point, when the US government says that it's time to dial back the tensions with China, at this point, why does the New York Times come in
And just to reiterate as well, we looked at this New York Times piece, and the entire New York Times piece that's smearing Code Pink, Tricontinental Institute, the People's Forum, it's all based on this one American tech guy, Neville Roy Singham, who's a multimillionaire like tech guy who has these progressive values. And guess what? He doesn't want to have Cold War with China. He sponsors some of these some of these groups, like some of these anti-war groups, and contributes to them. And he has offices in China and has done deals in China and has met with Communist Party officials in the past. That's it. That's the big connection. Like, they can't even prove that there's any funding coming from China or anything. It's literally this one American guy who does business in China, as do many Americans. But that's it. That's all the evidence they need to allege some kind of widespread conspiracy or some nefarious propaganda network.
Start a kind of new McCarthyite campaign against those who are trying to bring peace between the major powers in the world. Are papers like that carrying water for the arms industry? Are they carrying water for the right wing that really wants a war? I don't know. But I am perplexed that at a time when it appears that the major countries are trying to dial back the tension, the New York Times decides to come in alongside other lesser periodicals to ramp up the tension, to create fear where there shouldn't be fear.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. We're looking at some of the footage from the 1940s and the 1950s, the extreme hysteria that was ever
Get ready for
present in
way
the
more of
United
this.
States. The first time I got a job when I was, well, it's not my first job, but my first job when I was in my 20s
Yeah, exactly, with the
was
balloon.
at
Of course.
a clothing factory
We
in
talked about it
Manolo,
on this
and I had
show.
to sign a pledge then that said, I'm not a communist. Which I signed, even though that may not have been completely accurate. And, that was what the situation was. Even in 1972, people were having to still pledge that they weren't communists in order to get a job. In 1949, there was the Smith Trial Act.
You still have an immigration
Benjamin
system
Davis,
too that,
here in
that
New York
doesn't
City, the
allow
first black
communists to
city
immigrate into the
councilman, was
country.
put on trial for sedition and sent to prison along with 11 other members of the Communist Party. And then there were follow-up trials, and more than 100 officials in the Communist Party were sent to prison. And they were sent to prison not for what they did, but for what they believed. Because they believed in the Communist Manifesto and in socialism, that was what was made illegal. So dissent was criminalized. Protest was criminalized, opposition to the Korean War was criminalized, and what people were thinking was criminalized. And that's, we were taught later in the 1980s, the witch hunt was bad. But Manolo, the witch hunt is back. The demonization, the same tactics, they're back.
I mean, and they're back for similar reasons, like why they originated in the first place. I mean, when the witch hunt started in the late 40s, in the 1950s, and they attacked people like Paul Robeson, like Du Bois, also people like Claudia Jones, who was eventually deported from the United States for her beliefs and her work in the United States, organizing as a communist. There was a clear attempt to not just crush these particular figures and their importance to the movements as a whole, but they were trying to crush the movements, in fact. They were trying to crush workers' movements in the United States. They were trying to crush the civil rights movement in the United States. They were trying to crush all those who had, after the Second World War, had understood that the war against fascism didn't end in Europe, but that they actually had to fight for greater democracy, for greater rights inside the United States. And I think today, we're nowhere even near the strength or the possibilities of the movements of the past, but clearly the fact that there are millions of young people who in 2020 rose up in rebellion against the racist structures of the United States, who rose up against white supremacy, who today are actively questioning why this democracy exists, but only in the benefit of a few. Why do we continue to live in a society that sanctions police brutality? Why do we continue to live in a society that takes away abortion rights from more than half of our population? Why do we continue to live in a society where poverty is the norm and there always seems to be lacking for the majority of us? I think this attempt by the New York Times and other media outlets, but that seems to find an echo in the voices of the far right in the United States, ultimately wants to crush the movements of young people today. They want to crush the abolitionists. They want to crush the anti-war movement. They want to crush the feminist movement. They want to crush all of us young people who actually, despite having not lived through the earlier periods of
young people
McCarthyism,
like me as
are
well.
saying socialism actually does seem attractive to us. Socialism does seem to have the answers that we want for our society. And we have a clear message. And I think that's importance of us speaking out is that, unlike in the past, we won't be silenced. We refuse to be silenced. And we refuse to leave. There's nowhere else for us to go. Our fight is here in the United States, in the belly of the beast, to say not just to the far right, but to the rest of society that we're going to continue fighting for the world that we want.
I want to talk, Vijay, with you and Manolo about the New York Times and its role, because a lot of people think of the New York Times as like the newspaper of record, the most esteemed newspaper in the country. The right wing calls the New York Times liberal or left, which I kind of find funny at this point, because in the United States, the center right is called the left, and then there is the far right, and then there's the far right. And as our friend Randy Credico said, there's a fine line between the right, the far right, and the Third Reich. And I think the New York Times is, we have to think of it that way. But I want to go to we have some clippings of New York Times articles, actually. When you look at their record, especially with the Iraq War, they were selling the war. And this is a point that you've been making. Right now, they're selling hostility towards China. They're advocating for that, and they're demonizing people who are advocating for a different policy. Way back when, in ancient history, like 24 years ago,
hell yeah, Karen.
when peace activists could still get on the cable network news.
Let's get a fuck the NYT going in the chat.
A number of us who were protesting against the looming war in Iraq. We were talking against the war in Iraq. And so I was on Fox News regularly, MSNBC, CNN a little less regularly. But my last time I was on MSNBC, the guy who I was debating said, "You're echoing Saddam Hussein's talking points," because I was saying there are no weapons of mass destruction in Iraq. I have been following Iraq very carefully. I'd been to Iraq many times. I said, there are no weapons of mass destruction. There were 13,000 weapons inspections over an 11-year period. There are no weapons of mass destruction. And he said, and then he ends, and this is how the show ended, and it was the last time I was brought on to MSNBC. He said, "You're an Iraqi agent." And that's where it was going in the months leading up to the Iraq War. Suddenly, the mass media closed off debate, including the New York Times, Judith Miller, the whole rest of
those guys were in hog heaven out there. You understand, man? They had a big weapons catalog opened up. What's G12 do, Tommy? Well, it says here it destroys everything but the fillings in their teeth. Helps us pay for the war effort. Well, shit, pull that one up. Pull up G12, please. Cool. What's G13 do? Weapons for all occasions. And everyone got excited about the technology. And I guess it was pretty incredible watching a missile fly down an air vent. Pretty unbelievable. But couldn't we feasibly use that same technology to shoot food at hungry people? You know what I mean? Fly over Ethiopia. There's a guy that needs a banana.
I think this is the one.
Stealth banana.
and they started selling the war. And that's what's happening now. And that's why the, quote, new McCarthyism, where if you talk against the war, you're an agent of China. Like we were agents of Saddam because we didn't want war with Iraq.
Or agents of the Kremlin or Fidel.
It's really interesting that you said, put it that way. Let's go back briefly to the question of Iraq. I was also saying that there are no weapons of mass destruction. Now, on what basis was I saying that? Was I talking to the Iraqi government and getting their point of view and just amplifying it? That's the implication of you're an Iraqi agent. No, not at all. I was reading United Nations materials. I was reading and watching the statements of Hans Blix, who was the leading weapons inspector in Iraq at the time. Hans Blix was saying, look, we've been to all the sites. UN documents were showing that they couldn't find anything, maybe some chemicals here and there, which were of all kinds of uses, maybe to make fertilizer, maybe these were indeed weapons, but there was no evidence of mass weapons of mass destruction production. And we were speaking, therefore, on the basis of the material available, from the United Nations, not from the Iraqis. But because we were not in the echo chamber of the United States government at the time, now imagine, talk about the echo chamber when Mr. Colin Powell, at the time Secretary of State, goes into the Security Council meeting, briefed by his deputies, told to say that there is in fact evidence that there's an informant curveball who had given them the information. And later, years later, Colin Powell was upset, said, I was lied to. I wasn't told that the person from whom information came had been tortured in an Egyptian prison, and so on. Why am I saying all this? Because, I mean, who's an agent of what? I mean, I'm an agent of the truth. I tried to seek the truth. I tried to build my understanding of the truth from the facts, not from what the CIA whispers in my ear or any intelligence agency whispers in my ear. I mean, what we're trying to say now is that this conflict with China, which starts as a trade dispute, has accelerated beyond the imagination, I think, of even Barack Obama, who was one of the initiators of this particular wave of anti China sentiment. You will remember his pivot to Asia, the attempt to box in the Chinese to prevent Chinese developments in technology, in science, which includes high-speed rail, it includes green technology, includes robotics, telecommunications, and so on.
And I think the amazing thing about that as well is if you look at it like a graph that charts public opinion, that polls public opinion on China, you can literally see the pivot to Asia, exactly where it happens. For all the people that think we don't live in like a heavily propagandized society, or that we have a free press, or that our media, like the New York Times, has these like liberal goals, or these like some kind of important function in our society. And you just look at the ways that as soon as that pivot to Asia happened, the way that consent manufacturing machine just flipped on, and immediately starts broadcasting all their bullshit into people's brains, and it works. It works right away. And it's you can point to that exact moment when that pivot to Asia happens, when people still had a relatively positive view of China, and it immediately just starts to plummet, to the point that we're at now. We looked at even a couple years ago, even John Cena in 2018 was going to China and speaking Mandarin and was on the official WWE account talking about that, it's totally fine. And now if he did that, there'd be so many people getting angry and upset and calling him a communist agent or whatever. It's really just, it started in the pivot to Asia. You can see it start. It went into overdrive in around 2018, 2019 with the Hong Kong protests, and it's just been relentless since then. And it was everything. They've thrown everything at the wall to see what sticks. It was the Hong Kong thing. It's the Uyghurs. They go back to Tibet. It's just nonstop. The Michaels, and people believe it. And people think we live in this free society where we're not susceptible to propaganda or brainwashing, and you can pinpoint the exact moment when this pivot to Asia began. It's really incredible stuff. Yeah, Obama, that's the only thing he ever did wrong is wear a tan suit. That's what they say. Yeah, exactly.
Initially, this was a trade dispute. It was about hemming in China, not allowing China to have what the United States considered trade advantages.
The B-roll is Iraq
against
stuff,
the major tech companies of the United States. I'm not sure these trade advantages were, were produced by China in any other way than by basic commerce. I mean, they were out bargaining Western telecommunications companies in many parts of the world.
That's called the free market, I think.
But what begins as a trade dispute escalates rapidly into a dispute around security, war, Taiwan, red lines, Xinjiang, and so on.
I mean, no border. You say American and Western workers think that Chinese workers have stolen their job, which is not true. The profit from that China pivot was diverted towards the 1% in the first world nations. This is the amazing thing to me also that we talk about often, but our capitalist class happily took all those jobs and exported their entire manufacturing industry to not just China, but around the developing world. China has been able to use that manufacturing industry to build their productive forces and make all these huge investments in infrastructure and rail and poverty reduction, which we haven't seen a lot elsewhere in the developing world. Exactly why it's important to be led by a communist party, even if you're going to take on these kind of capitalist industries or allow this kind of capitalism in your society. When it's being steered by a socialist party, you see where the gains are still being distributed to other people. But the capitalist class in the West, we're happy to do this. They were laughing all the way to the bank about this. They thought it was wonderful to export their whole manufacturing industry to China and these other developing nations. And that's the funny thing now, is that these same people, through their mouthpieces in politics and the media, are now wagging their finger and saying, how dare China take away all these industries, all these jobs? Who did this? I can't believe this happened. This must have been some kind of devious plot. These people were thrilled. They were more than happy. They were thrilled to export the entire manufacturing industry. And all these like great union jobs that people had, where people could get a job in a factory right out of high school and have a great income and benefits and vacation time and be able to afford a home. You know, that was not a good deal for the capitalists that own these industries. They were more than happy to export all those jobs so they could take advantage of cheap labor in China and elsewhere. And now they're complaining about it. Now they're complaining, now that China's beating them, now that their economy is growing to be a larger size than the United States economy, and they're becoming this pole, this geopolitical pole. Now they're like, what? No, not like this. No, that's not allowed. That's not allowed. But like they're mad that they got beat at their own game that they control the rules of, which is the ultimate pathetic thing, right? They control the rules, who's allowed to be involved in this game and who it's rigged, totally rigged in their favor. And their own greed led them to, bring this massive manufacturing industry to China, which has allowed them to then develop at this hugely rapid pace. And now they're complaining about it. It's like, well, sorry, this is your own fault. Maybe you should look in the fucking mirror, some of these people. If there was a plan, they must have been planning for Russia to be on their side. Well, maybe, but then they did everything to alienate Russia and push them away at the same time. These people are morons. It's their greed and their belligerence which has created this entire situation for them. You know, they had won the whole end of the history period. They had won. Their enemies were destroyed. There were all these potential allies that were all split up and not working together. It's like they had completely won, and they created this current situation through their own belligerence and their own greed. Well, and that's it, Dakadoon. It's like there was no plan because they can't think in a long-term basis. Like China, whether you like them or not, has been planning things on a decade-by-decade basis. Here's where we want to be by 2050. Here's where we want to be in the future, right? They're on this path right now that they've laid out decades ago. Whereas because we live in this capitalist society, and that's the difference, by the way, between a socialist society that uses capitalism or a capitalist society where that's the prevailing ideology. We can't think in these kind of long-term things. All they can think about is quarter by quarter. Where's the quarter by quarter growth? And they're just thinking about next quarter and next quarter and next quarter and next quarter. And that's what it gets you. That's what it gets you. They're fucked now. And that's why they're mad. That's why they hate China. That's what this whole new Red Scare is about. They lost. They lost fair and square. But, you know, these people don't play fair at the same time. So now they're having a tantrum. They're having this big extended tantrum.
Very fast escalation into something like a hot war between two major powers. I am saying I oppose that war. Now, in saying you're opposed that war based both on the facts of what the dispute started in and based on the fact that a war between the United States and China would be catastrophic for the planet, which is already experiencing its own catastrophes. China is not Iraq. China is a country of 1.5 billion people with a ability to defend itself with nuclear weapons. China is not Iraq. If the Iraq war had an element of catastrophe, this is at a much greater scale, much greater quality of destruction. In saying that we oppose the war, we are being called agents of China for no reason. One of the things that they keep saying is that we are in contact with people in China. Yes, I run a research institute, an international research institute. I am in contact with scholars, research institutes around the world. There is no legal basis to say you shouldn't talk to people in another country. During the most dangerous point of the Cold War, scholars in the United States were in direct contact with scholars in the USSR. That's a productive thing. Human beings need to be in touch with each other. We need to encourage more contact, not less, not demonize contact. What the New York Times is doing, and what I find particularly offensive, is not only lighting the candle under the war makers, but it's also sending a message out there that contact with Chinese people is somehow dangerous. Don't be in touch with Chinese people. That is going to intensify anti-Chinese sentiment. And that all evidence already suggests that this kind of attitude creates attacks against Chinese Americans, Chinese people in parts of the West. A very dangerous situation. And I'm ashamed of the New York Times for going in that direction.
I want to also mention
you say that, young Mantic, and I know China doesn't want a war, but if you look at like what's going on WeChat, there are actually increasing numbers of Chinese that actually are getting kind of hyped for it, and that have this increasing like anti-Western sentiment, which is completely understandable. Completely understandable.
I would say the profoundly racist character of this demonization campaign, Manolo. I mean, the New York Times, they're looking for people all over the world who they say are echoing and repeating, these are very specific kinds of words, Chinese talking points. Like, for instance, Africans and African countries might get a better deal doing business with China than they would from the countries that colonized Africa. Now, the better deal might not simply be because one entity, China, didn't colonize Africa and the other countries did. It may be because it's a better deal. It may be because it's not trying to get maximum profits for Chinese corporations, that China's agenda may be access to resources, have sustainable relationships with countries that have natural resources.
Okay,
in other words, not getting
good.
top dollar for every transaction.
Talk you through all this.
Hi, Rob and Chat Peepohe.
Hey, Sam Sider, thank you very much. 27 months of Tier 1. Thank you, Sam Sider. First sub of the day, 1 hour in. We love it. Thank you, Sam.
So for a country in Africa or countries in Africa or companies in Africa, they might think, yeah, I'll do business with China instead of the United States, or I'll do business with both. And now the New York Times is saying if Africans say they don't have a colonized relationship with Africa, or that the deals they get might be better deals, then they are echoing and repeating Chinese talking points, as if Africans could not make up their own minds about what's a good deal and what's not a good deal. I mean, it's this kind of profound.
Excited to spread your good word. First, comrade.
Thanks, Ice Tray, for the 23 months of Tier 1. Very close to 24 months. Ice Tray. 24 month, aka 2 years, which, as some people know, will bring to you the elite and exclusive Shimmering Golden TRRS 2-year sub badge. Very, very close. Thanks again.
Racism that envelops the entire demonization campaign. So as VJ put it, Asian Americans right now are getting beaten up on the streets.
You can count on
Chinese researchers are being investigated, like in
all this.
Thank you, Dimitri, for the gifted sub as well. Thanks, Dimitri.
World War II, when the Japanese population was sent to concentration camps. If you're Asian or Chinese, you're suspect.
You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Moist
29 months of CCP talking points.
Thank you, Moist Towlets. 29 months, Tier 1. Thank you.
And then Africans, if they say, look, we want a better deal for Africa, and that might be with China in some instances, they too are just dupes of China. It's racism.
I mean, this racism that is so profound and I would say systemic to North American culture, politics, to its
colonialist
media,
mindset,
including the New York Times over the years. When it makes these claims, for example, I often think, why is it that Africans can't make decisions for themselves? Why is it that Africans, and I would say not just Africans, but Latin Americans or anyone, can actually determine what the best deal is? Regardless of whether China's deals are the best or not, I actually think that the peoples of the third world have enough experience, have a profound experience of actually dealing and trading with the US to know that ultimately, in the past centuries, what has trade with the US actually left us. It's left us in a permanent debt crisis where our countries are not able to even develop on their own terms, are in fact forced to continue to not even pay the debt, but to continue to force to be paid the interest of their debts over long periods of time, where our countries are forced to even cut their own budgets in order to pay for the interest of debt. All we know about trade with the US and the major European powers is the continued presence of their military bases on our territories around the third world. So the fact that after all of this experience, the peoples of the third world can't have the capacity to make a decision on their own is ludicrous. And I think, again, this is informed by the persistent racism of media platforms like the New York Times and many others. Those who consider themselves liberal, but liberal only to the point of literally not seeing the realities in front of them. And I think this New York Times article in particular, but many others, have precisely lacked facts. They have precisely lacked a concrete understanding of the reality in which the rest of the world lives in. I would say, and I would go further to add that the positions that we hold that are for peace, that are for engagement with China, that are for engagement with other countries around the world, that are opposed to sanctions, are the opinions of millions of people around the world.
The majority of
If you were to
people.
go to South Africa, if you were to go to Nigeria, some of the most populous countries on the African continent, you ask everyday people on the street, what is their opinion of China? Most people would have a favorable opinion. And not only that, people would be, in a majority, opposed to US foreign policy, not just against China, but against the rest of the world. I think that is remarkable. That's why, as much as the New York Times wants to...
That's what I always tell myself whenever we feel like our ideas, what we talk about on here, are marginalized or unpopular, which is true like in Canada and the United States. But and especially like when it comes to this, when it comes to Russia, Ukraine, these kind of things, I always remind myself though that like these kind of viewpoints that we articulate on here are widely shared, and we're in fact the majority. We might not be the majority in Canada, we might not be the majority in the United States, but in terms of like people's beliefs around the world on these issues, on U.S. imperialism, or the role of Russia and China, or any of these things, NATO, we're the majority. We stand with the vast majority of people around the world. But because our media and our political class represents what they call the free world, the rules-based international order, which really is a small percentage of the planet, of all the predominantly white, formerly colonialist countries, and they pretend that that's the only opinion that matters. But really, it's like when we articulate these viewpoints, no matter how alienating it might be sometimes to feel like we're alone in these beliefs in the society that we live in, we're actually not alone at all. We're actually standing with the vast majority of the rest of the people around the world, and I'm remain proud to do so.
Create factless accusations and allegations that are only based on innuendo. I feel comforted in the fact that I am in a generation and a moment in history where the majority of humanity is standing on the right side, where the majority of humanity actually believes that war can't be the path or the solution to our problems, and that it's better to live in a world where there are powers like China and Russia that actually offer an alternative, a possibility of being able to choose, rather than the hegemonic
That's what we
power
call
of the United
a majority
States
report
that never allows us to think, doesn't think that we're capable, thinks that we're actually idiotic and can't make decisions for ourselves.
Yeah, VJ. We were running those headlines from the New York Times. I wouldn't mind putting them back up on the screen here. They're like, to stop Iran's bomb Iran. Bomb Syria, even if it's illegal. Bomb North Korea before it's too late. From Iraq, lessons for the next war. The world, all aboard, America's war train is leaving the station. Bombing Iraq isn't enough.
You can count on me. You're going to have good
How
old
to choke
Rob to
Iraq.
talk you through all this.
Tershi, wow, great pun, Rob. Here are your she-bucks.
Thank you, Ramuskin Red, for the 29-month resub at tier 3. Wonderful. Thank you, Ramuskin Red. Very much appreciated. Yeah, or John McCain, bomb Iran. What a horrid person.
The case against Iraq. radioactive materials found at a test site near Baghdad. That was another Judith Miller story right before the invasion, the illegal invasion in 2003. I mean, when you look at those headlines, yeah, a lot of them are opinion pieces, but those are the New York Times picks the headlines. Just think if China's Daily had articles that said, to stop somebody's bomb, let's bomb them. Bomb Syria, even if it's illegal. Bomb North Korea before it's too late. If China talked the way the New York Times talked, if Russia media talked this way, we would consider that to be clear evidence that these states are addicted to war, addicted to militarism, infected with hubris and arrogance and racism. And yet in America, it's normal. This is the thing that Americans are so used to being propagandized and so used to the demonization. And after the demonization, like after the Iraq War, everybody said to each other, let's not let that happen again. Let's not, have the US media like the New York Times demonize a target so much so that the US can carry out an illegal act of aggression that took the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. Let's not have that happen again. And then the next time, when it's Gaddafi in Libya or Assad in Syria or now Xi Jinping in China, like everybody forgets about the demonization from the last time because the power of the US media is so great that the demonization seems normal. And as Nazi propagandists put it, if you tell a big lie enough times over and over and over again, it's accepted because how could it be repeated over and over and over again if indeed it was a lie? This is actually classic, neo-fascistic propaganda infecting American society and thus, sort of propagandizing the American people.
It's almost as if, and please stop me if this is too crazy, if this is too out there. It's almost as if, though, it's not about Trump being a fascist or DeSantis being a fascist, but the American government and American society already being fascist, regardless of which party is in power. It's almost like America's already fascist. And you might have different degrees of that you can go and vote for or whatever. It kind of feels like that sometimes, though. I'm sorry, Red Scare. I know that's upsetting for you. I know. Are we the baddies? It's almost like the fascist model is based on America in the first place and Canada. It is almost like that. But what would be really crazy is if after World War II, these Nazi sympathizing spies took over the whole United States government and, assassinated the next president that tried to get in their way before they waged a worldwide genocidal anti-communist campaign around the world. That would be crazy if that were to happen. That would be wild. Thank goodness that's not what happened, though. That would just be too much.
In a country that says we believe in free speech rights.
I mean, what's interesting, Brian, is it's so cliched. You first pick a country and say that this country is the enemy for a host of reasons that are often not declared publicly. They are not going along with our oil policy, or they're not allowing us to dominate the tech sector, or for whatever reason underlies the dispute. Forget that. Take a country, start demonizing it. Say that the leader is a monster. Gaddafi is a monster. Assad is a monster. Xi Jinping is a monster. Then put out there this slogan: Assad must go. Gaddafi must go. Saddam must go. Xi Jinping must go, and so on. Once you've done that, you've basically brought public opinion through the mighty Wurlitzer, as they used to say, the great music machine of the US media. You repeat this slogan: X must go, Y must go, and so on. And then that weaponizes the discourse into war. Exactly. Happens all the time. Very interestingly, there's another cliche, Brian, that I wanted to put on the table, and that's the cliche about China. Let's go back to why the term neo McCarthyism or the new
Gaddafi had drip.
McCarthyism is appropriate
No
now.
matter what you want to say about the
There
guy.
are punctual
Insane
moments
amounts of drip.
in US Chinese history where the US political class has turned on China because China has done something that it should not have done. It has, in some way, defied the United States allowance to countries in the third world. There are punctual moments when the US turns against China. And then some individuals are picked
Leaked
out
emails revealed
as
that Gaddafi
people
had
who
drip
have
indeed.
either gone
Yeah.
over to the Chinese side or betrayed the United States vis-a-vis a conflict with China. Let me just pick a couple of prior instances. In the 1950s, after the People's Republic of China was established in 1949, 1950s, there was a big discussion in the United States which could be summarized around three words: who lost China? Big debate. There was a very decent liberal man who worked for the US government called John Service. His name is now largely forgotten. Mr. Service became the character that they all latched upon and said John Service lost China. Mr. Service, quite an honorable man, served his country with some dignity. I don't know much about his personal life. I just, I read his book, which is about being honorable servant of the United States. Mr.
And his name is
Service
John
was
Service.
then pilloried as a kind of agent of China, somebody who had transport espionage and so on, just because Service said toward the latter part of the 1940s that, look, the communists are the only game in town who are not corrupt and they are going to win. And therefore, the United States must start a channel of discussion with them. Service was the poster boy of who lost China. And part of McCarthyism in the 1950s wasn't just about Russia. It wasn't focused only on Russia. It was also this question: who lost China? After the Soviet Union collapsed in the 1990s,
Inside you, there are two wolves, John Service and John Cipher. You have to choose carefully.
there was a period when it looked like both Russia and China had become pretty pliant. Boris Yeltsin essentially was effectively an agent of the United States government, if you don't mind me using that kind of language. He was basically operating as Clinton's man in Moscow. In China as well, there was a kind of quiet that settled in. China had entered into a second phase of reform after 1989. The reform starts in 1978. In the early 1990s, China was pretty quiet, trying to see what's going on in the world stage. By the late 1990s, China began to exert itself a little bit. You'll remember that there was a debate about China's position vis-a-vis the NATO war on Yugoslavia. And then, as you remember, NATO airships bombed the Chinese embassy in Belgrade. But around the same time, in the US Congress, Congressman Christopher Cox opened up a big debate inside Congress saying, essentially, who is an agent of China in the United States? And he opened hearings in the US Congress, pilloried a lot of people. Why? Because they had some sentimentality towards China, or they felt that conflict between the United States and China was just not a good idea. In the middle of this, a scientist in New Mexico by the name of Wen Ho Lee was fingered by the government. And he was arrested, held in
Sorry.
in solitary confinement. They made outlandish accusations against Mr. Wen Ho Lee. After Wen Ho Lee was eventually released, it was President Bill Clinton who apologized for the treatment meted out to Wen Ho Lee. But during the attack at Wen Ho Lee, Brian, nobody said a word. I mean, they all ganged up against this gentleman who had, as he wrote in his book was called something like Myself versus My Country. It's a very sad book. It's a lot like John Service's book, a book that says, what did I do? Why did you pick on me? So I would like to just say, just as there are the cliches of the New York Times and others taking the country to war, taking the United States to war, there are also the cliches of targeting people within and outside the United States and calling them agents of China, in particular, in this instance, Mr. Service, Mr. Wenholi. I want to recognize them because, in a sense, they are ancestors of those who are getting picked on today. This is not new. This has a history. And cliches may bore people because they say, well, we've seen this before. But each cliche is dangerous. Don't forget, Wenholi spent a long time in solitary confinement in prison. If people don't wake up to the reality of these cliches, the dangers of these cliches, history will indeed repeat itself. The only way to prevent
You
history
can
from
count on me.
repeating
You're going to
itself
have good old
is if
Rob to talk you through all this.
Ragdijin, thank you for the gifted sub. Very kind of you. Thank you.
people stand up and prevent that from happening. History is not an agent. People are the agents, and they must act to prevent these things from going on and on in a punctual, cyclical fashion.
I'm so glad you raised his case. Right now, Vijay and Manolo, there are investigations, FBI investigations against Chinese nationals, researchers,
We're seeing this in
scientists,
Canada too,
grad
right?
students in every state of the country, all 50 states. And the Chinese American community knows this. I mean, everybody knows it. And what happens when there's a witch hunt is if you don't denounce the witch, or especially if you're friends with the witch, or if you get up and say, hey, wait a second, I don't think the witch is a witch, that might be an indication that you're a witch, or you're the friend of witches. And so you become tarred. And so the tendency, especially I'd say among some parts of the population, yes, I'm speaking to you, middle-class liberals, run for cover instead of standing up, because you all know exactly what this means. When you target a people, when you create a witch hunt and a hysteria, not only are Asian and Chinese people subjected to violence and false investigations, but people shun other people. There's the shunning that takes place. This is not, comporting with what our notions of democracy are. If you say to everybody, yeah, you have the right to speak out. You have the right to say, I disagree with the United States government. I think there should be peace with China. And by the way, yes, I do think
Not
China's
allowed.
made some significant scientific, technological, and environmental advances. If you're afraid to say those things because you're going to be told or labeled that you're echoing and repeating Chinese propaganda points, if you self-censor, you become the enemy of democracy too. The only way to maintain free speech is to fight for free speech. We tell our kids, oh, this is a cherished right. This is something that makes America exceptional. Well, American free speech rights have been under attack from the get-go. I mean, tell Martin Luther King or Rosa Parks about free speech rights. They had to fight
Fred
for
Hampton.
it. And today we honor Dr. Martin Luther King. We take that day, his birthday off. We honor him. Well, during the Montgomery bus boycott, his house was blown up twice. And that's what's the challenge for us, Manolo, on the progressive forces, including everyone who might be momentarily intimidated, is get over being intimidated, stand together, fight together, defend free speech rights, because if we don't defend them, they're going to be eviscerated.
I mean, silence at this point only paves the way for these racist and fascist forces to completely take control of the society we live in. So that is unacceptable. And we can't.
I mean,
wait
Red
till the
Scare, you
moment
said
when
like
stand-
that. One of the things that really made Lenin click for me, and I've talked about this a number of times, just the very beginning of State and Revolution, where he talks about how these revolutionary figures are robbed of their revolutionary potential. When I was reading that passage, wasn't even aware that it was Lenin, and I almost assumed that it was about MLK, which is amazing because not only have moderate liberals that MLK railed against when he was alive, who despised him, have they rehabilitated him, but conservatives too. All these people are like, yeah, he would have been a conservative today. He would have hated Black Lives Matter. He would have hated whatever. he'd vote for Trump. It's just like, it's fucking amazing the way his memory has been completely distorted, like not only robbed of revolutionary potential, but completely distorted and mutated to suit whatever horrible, evil purpose, which he certainly would not have ever supported. And as we talked about before, his assassination came when he started linking the struggle for social and racial justice in America with anti-imperialism and attacking the United States military for Vietnam and making that connection. That's when he became actively dangerous, I think, to the powers that be.
Standing alone to say something. Now that we actually have force, that we actually have comrades, that we have people across the country, and I would say across the world, who are in agreement with our ideas, we have to stand up and stand together. Now, having said that, I actually think that things, as much as we're facing this new McCarthyism, as much as we're facing this new witch hunt, we are in a stronger position than, let's say, our comrades were in the 1950s or 40s. Why? Because there are millions of us. There are millions of young people who actually think that the world has to be changed. There are millions of young people who believe that socialism is actually a cool and attractive idea. And even more than that, we are young people who are organized in movements in ways that we haven't seen
optimism
before. It was only a few years ago that we were able to shed the wave of anti-communism that had initiated with the witch hunts of the 1950s. It's only a few years ago that we could begin even talking about socialism again in such an open way. I refuse to shut that door again. I refuse to go back into history. I refuse to go back to a moment when segregation and racism and police brutality and white supremacy are acceptable. I refuse to go back to a moment when LGBTQ people and women are forced to sit back.
What, you're not gonna? What you mean? This guy's not? You're not tailing Putin? You're not tailing Ron DeSantis on LGBTQ plus issues? What the hell? I thought socialists are supposed to be against those things. Fucking preposterous.
I refuse to go back into the silence of anti-communism and the Red Scare. Now is a time again to stand together, to be loud, to be unafraid, knowing that we are not a few, that these are not minority ideas, but that in fact, these are the ideas and actually the strengths and the movements of millions of people around the world who will actually transform the world we live in.
I'm so glad you mentioned the fact that the taboo on socialism started to lift not so long ago in the United States. And soon as it lifted, tens of millions of young people said, oh yeah, that makes sense.
This seems pretty cool.
Socialism sounds good. Of course, socialists are not allowed normally to participate in debates. But Vijay, I want to, as we're starting to move towards the end here, I wanted to remind our audience about what actually did happen. I was just thinking about this based on Manolo's comments. In 2015, Bernie Sanders, a very unlikely, curmudgeonly, older white man in the U.S. Senate, said he was going to run against Hillary Clinton. And the first debate, the very first debate on CNN, Democratic Party debate, a rare moment where, because he's a democratic socialist, where there's different trends in socialism, but he says, I'm a democratic socialist, meaning basically I'm not a communist. Right?
Socialism is already democratic.
Bernie gets up and he's running, and Anderson Cooper on national TV, first debate, and first question to Bernie is, Bernie Sanders, you're a socialist. How could you ever be president of the United States? And Bernie Sanders says, well, the reason we're going to win, Anderson, is, and then he talks about affordable housing and healthcare and, et cetera, free education, getting rid of student debt. He said, that's why we're going to win. And Anderson Cooper thought he was giving the knockout blow with this anti-socialist, anti-communist opening question. And in the next 3 hours of that debate, this was 2015, people can check it for themselves, $3 million in small donations came into Bernie Sanders' campaign. And suddenly, Bernie Sanders was a thing. And that's when it became okay, in a way, to start to talk about socialism. And tens of millions of people literally came out supporting this idea.
And also many people supported that idea and then also started picking up a couple books and said, hey, maybe we can go even further than this. What if we did that? This is really great. This is really great stuff to hear about, and it's inspiring. What if we went even further, though? Which I think is pretty neat.
I think in a way, one of the reasons the ruling establishment is so afraid of having a real free speech is that the ideas of progressivism, anti-war, anti-imperialism, anti-colonialism, and yes, socialism make so much sense and are so popular that it will take off. It will become a mass movement. So they're using this club to sort of, deprive people of
Reminded of the Nevada primary and how the reports Russia was funding Bernie, or like fucking, we watch that clip all the time. James Carville. You know who's really happy right now? Vladimir Putin. What's up, Vlad? He's like Putin sitting there watching MSNBC. Yeah, I'm sure he was really glued to his TV watching fucking James Carville and his political analysis.
an authentic debate where socialist ideas and the socialist program can compete against the capitalist imperialist notions. Anyway, VJ, go ahead.
Well,
and that's the thing, Ben, like I hear what you're saying. You say he killed the movement when he endorsed Clinton and now Biden. And like, I've been disappointed with some of that stuff too, as I've pointed out a couple times, but I don't think you can say he killed the movement, you know? I think for many people like me, he sort of killed the idea that like you can take that movement and go into these bourgeois parties and change them from the inside and make them socialist, or you can go into these bourgeois elections in our liberal democracy and as a socialist and run and win and create a socialist movement or a socialist government. That for me, that ideal is has been killed. Like I'm pretty cynical about that with both Corbyn and Bernie, seeing what happened to them. Regardless, though, there is still a movement. There is still a socialist movement that I think we have to give him credit for normalizing this and for helping to kick it off and bringing some of us into that, and allowing us to then take these ideas and go further with it, as I have done and as many others have done as well. And I think that's pretty cool, if you ask me. Even if I have been disappointed with some of the ways that Bernie has taken that movement and that big grassroots audience that he had and kind of shepherded them towards these endorsing Biden and all this stuff. I don't like that either, and I find it frustrating, but we'll always have a special place for me just for the role that he played for me and a lot of people.
I exactly agree with you. I would like the New York Times to open its opinion page to people like us so we can have a debate and a discussion with the readership and with the editorial team about what kinds of ideas we have. Rather than pillory us, why don't they discuss and debate us? When I was a young person, we used to laugh, and in the middle of our cliched debates, we would say, my opponent uses the lamppost not for illumination but for support. And in a way, I would say that that's what the New York Times is like. It's a place where a drunk leans against it for support and doesn't use the light to read by. Let's have a debate. I send out from Tricontinental a newsletter every week. The newsletter reaches over 1 million readers. On the 11th of August 2022, exactly a year ago, the newsletter had a headline, and the headline was quite simple. The headline was, "Can we have an adult conversation about China?" And I proceeded to talk about what an adult conversation about China would look like. Let me take this opportunity, Brian, to ask the editors of the New York Times if we can have an adult conversation about China. I'm willing to have a conversation in their opinion pages. I'm willing for them to ask me a set of questions about what I believe regarding China and US relations, as long as it's a discussion about what I think about China. If they cast aspersions at my character, or if they ask questions like that, they have walked away, in a way, from the real conversation. Let's talk about the role of China today. Let's talk about why people in the global south don't share.
And yeah, coherent screams. I mean, what you're talking about, you say, I wonder if the increase in popularity in socialism is directly correlated with the rise in living costs relative to wages. As people run out of discretionary income, suddenly capitalism and loses some or all of its charms. And that's exactly the contradictions of capitalism emerging and becoming more and more apparent, which is something that Marx predicted, right? And I think that's true. Unfortunately, though, the issue that we run into there is that people are losing faith in capitalism, but because we're so incredibly brainwashed, and because there's been this Red Scare, because there's been this official anti-communist state religion in the United States and Canada for decades and decades, it becomes difficult for people, even if they do become disillusioned with capitalism, to see what the answer is. And that leads to them getting radicalized in this completely wrong direction and supporting, reactionaries like Trump or whoever. And that's something that I guess we as socialists have to contend with. And that's why it's important to continue speaking about these things and organizing in our communities, our workplaces, etc. Or doing the most important form of socialism, which is Twitch streaming, as you all know. The main thing that Marx told us to do was this. And, am I a hero for doing that? We don't need to have any labels. We don't need to label anything. But I think we can all agree that it is the most important form of socialist organizing. That and podcasting, of course. The fence labeled communism is electric, and you've been told it's the most dangerous fence your entire life. Exactly. And people have a hard time getting by that. Like you saw there was a clip that went viral of this lady on Fox News talking about housing and stuff like that. And you see people, even Fox News people, even reactionaries, conservatives, are getting so disillusioned with this system. But they've been beat over the head since they were children that the answer to these issues is actually, the most dangerous thing that they could possibly do. I'm currently writing new theory based on Rob's streaming. Thank you, Dakadude. Thank you. Bernie walked so that we could stream. That's what I've been saying. That's right. Yeah, and that's what I've been saying, coherent streams. They're losing faith in capitalism, but afraid of socialism due to brainwashing. Exactly right. But I think the more that these contradictions emerge and the more that people's material conditions continue to decrease, it does provide an opportunity for all of us to contribute to deprogramming people from these kind of contradictory ideas that they've been programmed with.
The opinions of the New York Times regarding China or Chinese policy. Look, nobody's saying China is utopia and nothing is wrong with it. These are people trying to build a society, trying to live in the world. Obviously, there are a lot of problems with China. But when do those problems rise to the level of alarm? There are problems in the United States. There are more people per capita incarcerated in the United States than anywhere else in the world. Any US city has lots of homeless people. The disregard for poorer people in the United States is cavalier. Is that genocidal? Do we use terms like genocide to discuss that? No, I would like to have an adult conversation about the United States. I don't want to throw around juvenile statements to try to pillory the US. Let's have a real conversation. Is there the possibility to change the balance of forces so that poverty and homelessness isn't a normal thing in the United States? Let's have that discussion. So again, I'm open to having a real conversation, but these people are not interested in a conversation with us. I fear that we live on two planets. They would like us to disappear. And in a sense, that's a kind of ideological disregard that they have for people who come from the kind of premises that I come from, you come from, and others. There's an ideological disregard, and that's too bad. It actually hurts the culture. US culture is damaged by this kind of narrowness. Cultures are made vibrant and enriched when people have the guts to have really difficult conversations about difficult issues in the world. When you try to shut down the conversation by pillorying people, you're damaging your own culture.
Manolo, we saw some footage during the course of our discussion today of Bill Gates. He's meeting with Xi Jinping, and it's considered kind of okay because Bill Gates is not part of the anti-war movement. He's not part of the movement against colonialism. He's part of the, standard big capitalist class. And so it's kind of okay for him to talk to China. But if leftists or anti-imperialists or anti-war people, peace activists, talk to China, or even say, like Bill Gates does, that there should be better relations, not worse relations between U.S. and China, then these forces get targeted, demonized. You are a principal organizer of the campaign that's called McCarthyism is Back. Together we can stop it. That's where we started this interview. This is where I want to end it. I want to ask you to tell the audience if you agree with what we're saying here, if you think the New York Times and the other vehicles of mainstream corporate-owned media whipping up a hysteria against China is not a good idea. If you think a new witch hunt against the left is a bad idea, join us or join this campaign. How do they do it? I'm going to give you the final word.
Thank you, Brian, for inviting me to give the final word. I mean, ultimately, we are not white philanthropists trying to perpetuate this horrible system of capitalism and its violence and terror against our people all over the world, and including inside the United States. We are, in fact, young people, organizers, leaders of different movements, not just in the People's Forum, but across the United States, who clearly understand that they are trying to repeat history, but we won't allow them. We are standing tall, we're standing strong, we're standing united with brothers and sisters and people, even across the different lines of the left in the United States. We're even bringing people who are not on the left, but who understand that free speech and democratic rights must be defended. But I know there are many more people out there. So we're looking for y'all. We're looking to come together with as many different people in the United States who understand that we can actually make a difference and actually send this witch hunt back into history. Not just because we want to defend ourselves, but because we actively want a better society. And there's nothing more patriotic, there's nothing more American than following in the traditions of Martin Luther King, of following the traditions of people like Paul Robeson and Du Bois, who actually defined the real character of the people of this country.
And if people want to go and sign up, become part of the campaign, where do they go?
We asked them to look at the People's Forum website, but you can also look at the website for the Tricontinental Institute, also called PINK and the Answer Coalition. On any of our websites, you can look for the sign-on statement. And it's not just a sign-on statement. Feel free to share on social media. Feel free to raise your voice and be in touch with us about other steps in the upcoming campaign.
Manolo, VJ, thank you so much for joining the Socialist Program.
That was fantastic, as usual. Great stuff from Brian. I'm glad that they could do a piece on this because I've been talking about this week. There's the link in the chat. Here's the lady on Fox News that I was talking about. When we talk about how these contradictions are emerging for everybody, Yeah.
I am so tired of feeling helpless as a parent. Yes, my kids are grown adults. My oldest is 28, my youngest is 25. And I thought by teaching them what I learned, which is you work hard, you get a good job, you're going to get the things in life that you need, right? Worked for me, why wouldn't it work for them? Because it doesn't. Because the world has changed, all right? And now I feel like I see them struggling. And before my generation comes at me, yes, I understand struggling is a part of life. We all struggled. But there's a difference between struggling and drowning, all right? So we struggled, and it was tough. But you know what? We made it. We knew there was a light at the end of the tunnel with our struggle. It seems like kids today, no matter how much they struggle, they just get further and further down the water into the drowning point, all right? When I was their age, I was making less than $10 an hour, and I could afford to live on my own. Now you have to be making six-figure salary to get a decent, tiny little place to live. So what the is going on, and how do we help them as parents? I told my son, all you have to do is work hard, go to college, or join the military like I did. He went to college, got his degree, got a full-time job, He moved back in with me right when he graduated from college because he said, hey, Mom, as soon as I get a job, which was within 2 weeks of him getting out of college, maybe take me 2 months and I'll save up enough money for me to move out. Okay, cool. It's been 10 months. He has saved almost every dime and still can't afford to live. Why are one-bedroom studio apartments almost $2,000 a month? Why? Like, I just don't get it. So I don't even think that there's even classes anymore. There used to be, upper class, middle class, lower class. It's literally turning into the ultra wealthy, and then everybody else is just poor.
Yeah, lady, I have a book for you to read about just that. I have a book you can read about that that's going to explain a few things. So you know what I mean? It's just that's what I'm kind of talking about. And like, I thought this was important as well. This was Caitlin's quote tweet on this. Which is absolutely right. I mean, I don't want to give people too much credit that are coming from the conservative movement that are starting to realize these things now. Caitlin said, millennials have been talking about this for the past 15 years while Fox News called us snowflakes and made fun of people who had to live with their parents. I'm glad they're suddenly taking it so seriously. I mean, this is it. But I think that's why I wanted to look at that, because I think that's what was coming up, right? Is that these contradictions are becoming more and more clear to everybody, and it's becoming impossible to just paper over them. And I don't necessarily think that these kind of people, like in this video, are just like socialists in waiting and we're going to be able to go and talk to them. This is what the MAGA communists tell us, right? Or the patriotic socialists or what have you. No, you just go and talk to them and they're going to become communists. Like, I don't really necessarily believe that. But I think what is easy to follow and easy to understand, which is that it's becoming more and more difficult for anybody to have faith currently in our system with where it's going. And that's what I mean when we know as socialists, as Marxists, we have the answers to those questions. We know why things are the way they are. But because people that have grown up in this kind of environment or this context have this completely warped, mutated, distorted idea of what Marxism is or what socialism is, they all think Joe Biden's a Marxist. You know, if you ask this lady, I'm sure she would agree. Marxist Joe Biden, like that poor motherfucker in Utah that just got airholed by the FBI because he's making these. It's impossible not to laugh. He's making these like credible death threats on Facebook using like minion memes, being like, "After the FBI comes, I got a gun for you," and they just immediately come and just shoot him, because he thinks Joe Biden is some like Marxist. You know, that's how warped people are and how distorted people's ideas are about these things. Yeah, and her conclusion will be like, this happened because the U.S. Became socialist, for sure. So I don't necessarily believe that these people are just like going to become socialists the moment that we go start speaking to them about these things. But I think what's impossible to deny is that these contradictions are becoming more and more apparent to everybody, even people that really bought into this and he believed in this shit. You know, that's and I guess, yeah, as socialists, as Marxists, that's our goal, is to continue getting our analysis out there so people understand when they start having these questions that there are answers. You know, I don't have a lot of faith in this generation, but I have a lot more faith in the younger generation. That's why a lot of these socialists or quote unquote socialists are anarchists or social democrats that are out there trying to give these answers. I wish they would stop piling onto this new Red Scare and contributing to it and start meaningfully pushing back against it, which is what they're not doing. Yeah, I couldn't help but laugh at that guy. I'm going to enjoy shooting Joe Biden with this specific rifle day tomorrow. I'll be waiting this exact address, FBI. Come get me. And they just come and they get him. Yeah. Don't have, ACAB, of course, I agree, but I don't really have too much sympathy for that fella. You know? Did we see that guy? Did you look at that guy? Here's one. Here's one of the posts. He's got a whole bunch of these. Craig Robertson. Hey, FBI, still monitoring my social media? Checking so I can be sure to have a loaded gun handy in case you drop by again. And they immediately just came in and shot him. I'm sorry. You know, the FBI is they're usually so busy, you know, going after people like us, Marxists and socialists and social and racial justice organizers, that I can't complain all that much when they finally turn that on to one of these motherfuckers. Yeah, at first I thought it was Craig Robertson as well. I was confused. I actually thought it was. He's got more. Look at this guy. this guy. What is this guy doing? He's writing these posts. In my dream, I see Joe Biden's body in a dark corner of a DC parking garage with his head severed and lying in a huge puddle of blood. Hoorah! Perhaps Utah will become famous this week as the place a sniper took out Biden the Marxist. And he's dressing up in this like tactical gear. Like I almost feel bad, not quite. I almost feel bad just because these people have been so badly fucking brainwashed. You know, that's what I was talking about. Brainwashed against these like in this kind of this relentless anti-communism where they think Joe Biden is some Marxist that's going to come get them, and then they end up getting blown up by the FBI. What's the forecast here? A thunderstorm watch. It's gonna rain here. Oh, good. Starting to get very cloudy outside. The communist FBI gets another patriot. That's what I mean. It's like the whole FBI is like exists to ensure that this exact kind of guy has the right to do and say whatever he wants. But his brain has been so melted by this like Facebook minion meme reactionary propaganda that he thinks the FBI is some kind of like Marxist organization or something like that. That's how completely brain melted people are, especially people in that generation. You combine the nonstop lead poisoning with the nonstop propaganda that they got pumped into them since they were kids, and it creates some pretty interesting results. Anyway, folks, I gotta go soon. I'm sorry I wanted to do another longer stream today and make it to like hopefully another 6-7 hours, but I have to go. I gotta go bring my cat to the vet. I gotta bring Momo to the vet. I'm very stressed out. So I gotta do that. It looks like it's gonna rain soon, so I gotta leave pretty soon. It's only 2 hours. I'm not expecting to hit the sub goal. I'm at 6 out of 35. If you do want to support this show and support this stream before I go, I would certainly really appreciate it. I would like to try and come back later on to do some more streaming.
You're gonna have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
No, I don't have to take my son to the vet. I have to take the cat, who is like my daughter. But now she's elderly, so she's not really my daughter. Now I think in cat years she's older than me. Thank you very much, Diego, for the 2 gifted subs. So if you can support the show, folks, again, I'm not expecting to get to the 35 today, but I will try and come back. It really depends on how long it takes and how serious this is. So we'll see. We'll see if I'm back. I may be back. I may not. I'm not really sure. But if you can, please support the show. You know? I would appreciate it. I'm stressed about the cat, and it would make me feel better. Subbing right now or gifting a sub would be like giving me a hug and a gentle smooch on the head. And if that's something that you're interested in, well, you can do that for only $5 by subscribing to this show or gifting subs. You can also subscribe completely free if you have an Amazon Prime account, which you convert to a Twitch Prime sub very easily. So I got about, if you do want to subscribe, you got about 7 more minutes to do so. You got 7 more minutes to subscribe if that's what you want to do. And I would sure appreciate it.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Thank you for the gifted sub, Anon. Very kind of you. Thank you. This is the Momers. This was the day I met Momo.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
This is the day I met Momo. Now she's an old, elderly beast who cannot keep herself clean for the life of her. Thank you, Ben, for the gifted sub. What about this image, folks? Does this make you want to sub? Does this make you want to support the channel?
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Thank you, Crad Babes. Thank you, Crad Babes, for the gifted sub. She made it onto Fox News that one time. That's right. Yeah. I'm worried about Mama. She really just doesn't seem happy right now. She doesn't seem like she has a very high quality of life at the moment, and it's making me
You can count on
sad.
me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Ben, thank you very much for the gifted sub. Thank you, Ben. Yeah, there's the picture. There's the exact picture, Dr. Awesome. That's right.
You've just become an elite member
goodness.
of the Friendship Triangle.
Oh goodness, Fart Party 69. Thank you very, very much, Fart Party 69, for the incredibly generous 5 gifted subs. That's a person that cares about this cat. And this stream, and me, and this community. Fart Party 69, thank you so much. Very, very much appreciated. The headline is funny. New Red Scare with featuring me holding a tiny little kitten.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Wishing the best for you and Momo.
Thank you for the 4 months of Tier 1 Butt Nerd 69.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all
We got
this.
Fart Party 69.
20
and
months of being part of the cult. Friendship Triangle. Hope to indoctrinate. Make new friends.
we got Fart Party 69 and Butt Nerd 69, another valued community member. Butt Nerd 69. We just need Anus Beard to stop by again. And thank you, Osaku, as well, for 20 months of Tier 1. Thank you, Osaku. I'm a butt nerd as well, aren't we all? Aren't we all? Just a whole bunch of butt nerds over here. Butt nerds of the world unite. Stupid storm. You missed the stream because of a storm, Sean? We, looks like we're getting it here. We're getting it here in a couple minutes. It's really the storm clouds have gathered. The storm clouds are gathered. Now I'm gonna have to bring Momo to the vet and there's some kind of lightning storm situation. So many Momo pictures in my Google Photos. So many Momo pictures. Like the time Momo tied one, she partied a little too hard in the Christmas holidays. You know, we've all been there. We've all been there. You know how it goes, right? Oh, look how tiny she was. Look how tiny. Look how tiny she was. She's so cute. She's not quite as cute anymore, but I still love her very much. Do you have any other takers, folks? Any other takers before I have to go? We got 45 seconds left in the hype train. 19 out of 35. Do we hear 20? Do we hear 20? Is 20 a possibility?
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Momo is always cute.
Thank you, Blueberry.
You can count on me. You're going to have good old Rob to talk you through all this.
Thank you, Blueberry, for the 32 months of Prime. Very much appreciated. And thank you also, JJ Got Bored, for 9 months of Tier 1. Stream Baby. Wonderful. Wonderful.
Of aspects that he saw as heretical innovation. Much like figures such as Ibn Taymiyyah, he believed that...
About your first thing, my bad. No, that's exactly, like, it's just... It really is the antithesis to...
Thanks for watching the stream, everybody. I gotta get going. I'm gonna get up there and try and do this. I guess I've been dreading this all day, but you gotta bite the bullet eventually. I may be back later. Like, depending how things go, I may be back for another couple hours later. We will see. We will see, but if not, I'll be here again tomorrow. Thank you, Mac at work. Good luck at work. And, yeah, we'll see how it goes, okay? But, thanks everyone for hanging out with me briefly. A very brief stream. I appreciate it. I appreciate all of you. And I'll talk to you soon.